Star Wars fans, what if Disney never made the sequel trilogy? Now, I'm not saying what if Disney never bought Star Wars. I'm not saying any of that. I'm still saying they made the Rogue One movie, they made the Solo movie, they made the Mandalorian, they made the Book of Boba Fett, they made the Clone Wars Season 7, they made Bad Batch, they made all that stuff. But what if they just didn't make the sequel trilogy? Where would we be at as a fan base? What would be going on in Star Wars? Let's get right into all this crazy stuff right now. What's up, guys? Mike, a guy who loves Star Wars here. So today we're talking about something crazy. What if Disney never made the sequel trilogy? The sequel trilogy, whether you like it or you don't, you can clearly tell that there's a huge divide in the fan base because of this sequel trilogy. But what if they didn't even make the sequel trilogy? What if they didn't even make the trilogy at all? First of all, the first movie would be Rogue One, which got amazing reviews. Fans loved it. It's such a great story, and it would just be like, okay, Disney owns Star Wars, we're okay with this, because Rogue One was awesome. You'd have Star Wars Rebels, which is the animated show coming out, and a lot of people like that. If you're a big-time Star Wars Rebels fan, tell me in the comments, but also, good to meet you, because it's such a good show. Star Wars Rebels, I keep saying, underrated. All the animated stuff, extremely underrated, but Star Wars Rebels is very, very underrated. Especially now that we're going to be getting the characters of Thrawn and Ezra and Sabine and all those main characters in Star Wars Rebels in the live-action Ahsoka show, and maybe even in Mando Season 3, you're going to want to watch that show. But then we would get Solo, a Star Wars movie, and this would be a lot more controversial than Rogue One. Obviously, a lot of people just loved Rogue One, but it would be nothing compared to The Last Jedi or any of the sequel trilogy at all. Solo was more loved than hated, and Solo touches upon an original character, gives an origin story to Han Solo. You see a young Chewbacca, you see these new characters of Kiara, and you have the return of Darth Maul. Obviously, if you've seen the Clone Wars, you know that Darth Maul returns in that years before, but you don't know that he's alive up until the Solo point in training Kiara and the head of the Crimson Dawn. You don't know any of that stuff until you see the Solo movie, and that's pretty like, oh my god, did that just happen? So you have Rogue One. Boom, everybody loved it, all the characters die at the end, spoiler alert, but that's how it ends, and people still even loved it. Then you have Solo, you have the return of Darth Maul, you have a young origin story for Han Solo and a young Chewbacca, and of course Woody Harrelson, you can't go wrong with him. So then you're 2 for 2. You got the animated show Rebels going hard, it's hitting on all cylinders, it's such a good show, and then you have The Mandalorian. Ladies and gentlemen, we've hit the Disney Plus age where Disney Plus is awesome. If you're a Marvel fan, if you're a Star Wars fan, whatever you are, you're on Disney Plus. You're watching The Mandalorian, you're watching Book of Boba Fett, you're watching Moon Knight, which is coming out right now. You watched WandaVision, you watched Loki. The age of Disney Plus is here, and it all started with the hit, knock out of the park hit, The Mandalorian. So The Mandalorian would come out, and everybody would be so hyped. It takes place after Return of the Jedi, the first thing to ever take place after the original trilogy. Ever. The sequel trilogy doesn't exist yet. This is the first thing that ever happens, and it's The Mandalorian, which is loved. Absolutely loved by all fans, even casual ones, because of course, Grogu. Previously known as the Child, or as a lot of people like to call him, Baby Yoda. Grogu came into our lives, and all fans of Star Wars absolutely loved him. The Mandalorian Season 1 could not have been a bigger hit. It couldn't have been bigger. It was gigantic. To this day, I still think it's the most watched Disney Plus show ever. That's including Marvel shows. That's including all the other stuff. It is the most watched thing. So now you got Rogue One, boom. Rebels is doing great. Solo, boom. Return of Darth Maul, origin story for Han Solo. And now you got The Mandalorian, first Disney Plus show, and it is a banger. It is huge. It is blasting on all cylinders. Grogu's awesome. Din's awesome. Everything is awesome. Get it? The Lego movie? And even in one of the episodes, you get a tease towards Boba Fett. And at the end, you see the Darksaber with Moff Gideon. People get hyped. And then we go into the Clone Wars Season 7, a beloved show by many, many, many Star Wars fans. The Clone Wars ran for 6 seasons when George Lucas was in control. Then he sold it to Disney and it immediately stopped. The Clone Wars was dead in its tracks. It ended Season 6 with Yoda going on an adventure, Ahsoka already left the Jedi Order, and all that crazy stuff happened. But then we get a Season 7 in 2020, and this Season 7 was pretty awesome. You have Ahsoka in the early episodes that weren't that interesting, but then you have the Mandalorian arc and the Bad Batch arc at the beginning. The Mandalorian arc is unbelievably good. The Siege of Mandalore, insane. The fight between Ahsoka and Maul, unbelievably good. Order 66, all of it. It's awesome. Can't go wrong with Clone Wars Season 7. Animated stuff from Disney, unbelievable. So good, great, whatever. It leads into the Bad Batch, which will come out the following year. Later that year, you get The Mandalorian Season 2. After your huge hit show, Mandalorian Season 1, are you going to bring it in Mando Season 2? Oh my goodness, yes, you're going to bring it in Mando Season 2. It blows Mando Season 1 out of the water. You got Bo-Katan. You got Ahsoka Tano. You got the return of Boba freaking Fett. Now, this would be the return of Boba Fett like it has been since 1983. Since Return of the Jedi when he falls into the Sarlacc pit, Return of Boba Fett. Tamara Morrison, yes. And then the finale, of course. The finale would be so much bigger, way, way bigger, if the sequels did not ruin Luke Skywalker. Now, however you feel about Luke Skywalker in the sequel trilogy, if you think he was ruined or not, I don't hate you if you hated him, I don't hate you if you loved him. However you feel about Luke Skywalker in the sequel trilogy, you can't deny that it split the fan base hard. A lot of people didn't like it, a lot of people did like it, but what if that wasn't even the first time we ever saw Luke after Return of the Jedi? What if that wasn't it at all? What if the very first time you ever saw Luke Skywalker after Return of the Jedi was at the end of Mandalorian Season 2? When he comes in and saves the day, comes and saves Din and Grogu from all the Dark Troopers, it would be unfreaking believable. All the people who cried when Luke showed up and they were just sobbing their eyes out because it's their hero from when they were kids would be even more people. Because if you think he got ruined in the sequel trilogy, here he is. Here he is for the first time in 40 years since you've seen Luke Skywalker in live action. Here he is for the first time, and it's only a few years after Return of the Jedi. Then after the craziness and the crazy hype of The Mandalorian Season 2, you go into The Bad Batch, which is another animated TV show, which a lot of people don't really seem to like, but I think it's a pretty good show. It stands its own. It's got a cool little story. It's one of the more, it's on the lower edge of the animated stuff. I'd say Star Wars, The Clone Wars, Rebels right next to it, if not up with it, and then it would be The Bad Batch underneath. It's just not as good. I can't lie to you guys. But The Bad Batch was just something. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. It was Star Wars. It was cool. And then we get the Book of Boba Fett. Now, however you feel about the Book of Boba Fett, I mean, we're a few weeks, months-ish now, out from the end of that show. And you can't deny that episode 5 and 6, I know Boba wasn't even in those episodes. He wasn't. It was his own show. He wasn't in them. You can't deny that those weren't like some of the best Star Wars you've ever seen. That Luke Skywalker training Grogu stuff is insane. It's absolutely insane. It's probably my favorite thing of Star Wars ever, and it just so happens to be in the Book of Boba Fett, so that show is just elevated just from those 2 episodes. The finale I don't think is as bad as people make it seem. The showdown between Cad Bane and him is awesome, and the first few episodes aren't that bad. The train heist in episode 2, and of course him escaping the Sarlacc. People have been wondering about that for 40 years, and you see him actually escape the Sarlacc. It's not as bad as a lot of people make it seem. So the Book of Boba Fett comes out, and you're like, okay, sick. And now you're getting hyped for Kenobi. The trailer for Kenobi drops right after the Book of Boba Fett, and you're like, oh my god. And now you would be in the spot you are now, getting hyped for Kenobi. And looking forward to Andor, Mando Season 3, the Ahsoka show, all these crazy stuff. And then they announce, we're doing a sequel trilogy. Imagine they hadn't done the sequel trilogy yet, and they're doing it just now. They're going to build up the Mandalorian timeline all the way until the sequel trilogies, and then do the sequel trilogy. They won't have that huge gap in between. They'll build all the way up. They'll build your hype from Mando. You'll be like, what's going on? What's going on with the main characters? What's going on with Luke? What's going on with Leia? What's going on with Han? We saw Luke, but we don't really know what's going on with him at all. What's going on? And then it hits us with the sequel trilogy. All these characters that you've been following, Din, Ahsoka, all of them, they're pushed off to the side for now because the main characters of the original trilogy have something going on. Now, even if you are a fan of the sequel trilogy, and it even happened the exact same way just years later, you probably can't tell me that it wouldn't be better. If you love The Last Jedi, if you love Rise of Skywalker, if you love The Force Awakens, you can't tell me that there isn't flaws with those movies. There definitely are. There are some great spots. There's some great things in those movies. I mean, cinematically, they're just unbelievable. They're breathtaking. But we're talking about the story here. We're talking about the original characters, Luke, Han, and Leia, Chewbacca, of course, Lando, all of it. They should have been together from the jump. All 4 or 5 of them should have been together from the jump. We shouldn't have had to wait 3 movies to see Lando. We shouldn't have had to get a death every movie for each of our main characters. When you look back at it, The Force Awakens is just the death of Han Solo. The Last Jedi is the death of Luke Skywalker, and The Rise of Skywalker is the death of Leia Organa. It shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't. And maybe you're asking, well, they can't do that. The actors were getting older. They had to make the sequel trilogy before they either died, rest in peace, Carrie Fisher, or they got too old that we could even use them. They don't look anything like their characters anymore. If they were doing it right after Return of the Jedi, it wouldn't make any sense because they obviously aged by 30 plus years because that's how long it took them to make these movies. But you got Shamook. You got Shamook to bring in the YouTuber Shamook, who did a great job CGIing Luke Skywalker at the end of Mando Season 2, and you brought him back to do the whole episode. You literally made him ahead of his own department because he did so good at deep faking Luke Skywalker's face in the Book of Boba Fett. And literally watching that episode, you're like, that is Luke Skywalker. That is Luke Skywalker 5 years after Return of the Jedi. That's him. That's him. So you're telling me that he couldn't do that for a whole sequel trilogy? You'd have to bump his pay, sure. But you're telling me he wouldn't do that for a whole sequel trilogy. Do you think that Star Wars would be at a better spot now if the sequel trilogy hadn't yet happened? If it were to happen in a few years, or it just wouldn't happen at all? If we just got TV shows for the rest of time, would you be okay with that? Or we got another trilogy, but it just didn't have anything to do with the original saga. Would you be okay with that? Tell me in the comments below. Do you think the sequel trilogy either shouldn't have happened, or do you think we would be better off now if it hadn't happened yet? Would our Star Wars fanbase be less divided with Rogue One, Solo, Rebels, Clone Wars Season 7, The Mandalorian, and the Book of Boba Fett? That's it. If that's all that Disney gave us, would we be okay with that? Tell me in the comments below. Smash like if you like this video, hit subscribe, and hit that bell so you get notified every time I post a video, and my pretty face will show up in that recommended feed of yours. Tell me what you think. Sequel trilogy, yay or nay? If you like it, if you don't, if you think it never should have happened, if you think it shouldn't have happened yet, if you think that we would be better off as Star Wars fans if it hadn't happened yet. If Rogue One and all those stuff still happened, but the sequel trilogy didn't, would the Star Wars fanbase be better as a whole? And may the Force be with you, always.